Welcome, fellow gamers, to a party roll highlight. We're going to be showcasing 2 tank builds in the next few weeks, so I thought it's a great opportunity to do a deep dive into the role of the tank. Of all the party roles in D&D 5th edition, the 2 that are surprisingly difficult to build well are the party support crowd control and the tank. Now, some would argue that a good offense is a good defense. However, a good tank keeps his fellow party members safe by enticing or taunting creatures to find him an irresistible target. So what makes you juicier than a caster in dental floss armor or a healer in a can who hits like a ton of fleas? Let's find out. So for the tank, a high AC and a deep hit point pool go without saying. But a well-balanced tank knows that the damage isn't always a weapon attack. They need to have the major stat safes covered for those nasty spells, be resilient against being charmed or controlled for the DM's delight of turning you against your party members, be able to dish out disadvantage to make those same party members seem like hard targets, lock targets down if they try to stray out of our humble embrace, and have the mobility to intercept wayward mobs. They are required to be the pincushion to free the healer to ply their trade unmolested so they can concentrate their healing on a single source and save those precious spell slots. Keep those mobs thirsting for your blood as rogues, monks, and casters are burning them down. Building a well-rounded tank is not impossible, but it comes with trade-offs. Juggling hit points, armor class, initiative, well-rounded saves, and a slew of abilities can be a daunting task. As long as you're willing to strike a balance, it's doable, but for the tank it sometimes means sacrificing one area to highlight another, or sacrificing damage. Something that is hard for the casual player to do, but if well built, the true tank is quite rewarding. So let's look at the various aspects of the tank. So let's take a look at damage avoidance and damage mitigation. Damage avoidance at its most basic level can be best illustrated by armor class. A hit never registered never generates damage. Feats and abilities that temporarily or permanently raise your armor class are beneficial, like the feats Defensive Duelist, Dual Wielder, fighting styles like Defense, spells like Shield-Bearskin, Shield of Faith, or even class traits like the Artificer's Enhanced Defense Infusion are all good examples. However, there are other forms of avoidance, such as disadvantage that complicates the to-hit process to you, such as dodge, the Artificer Defender's ability to deflect attacks, or spells like Bestow Curse. Now, damage immunities would also fall into this category as well. Class immunities like the Paladin's Divine Health or Aura of Courage and Devotion, but these are more rare. But anything that allows you to reduce or prevent being hit are high priorities for the would-be tank. Damage mitigation is the process of reducing incoming damage that has already occurred through a successful hit, but through skills, spells, and abilities can be reduced. This is strictly tied to your hit points. So anything that mitigates some or all of the damage, great examples of these are going to be the Barbarian Rage Resistances to Bludgeon, Slashing, and Piercing, the Feat Heavy Armor Master that resists 3 points of any source of the same types. But not all attacks will come your way from weapons. We also have to consider spell damage and effects. Damage mitigation sources are found everywhere in D&D 5th edition, from racial and class benefits to spells and abilities. As the tank, the more damage types you can mitigate, the greater your survivability. One route taken by some tanks is the use of the Druid Circle of the Moon Wildshape. By indirectly turning into creatures to absorb hit points, leaving your player character's hit point pool intact is an incredible form of damage mitigation. So let's take a look at stats and resistance. Those of you who follow our build showcases know we exclusively use the point buy system for consistency in our guides. Now, I'm not familiar with the statistics on the popularity of character stat generation, but I sure remember the old days of rolling out 3d6 and having a fighter as done as a turnip. Most of the time, you based your character on what individual stats stood out. I have to say the game has matured on that front. Now, we always assume that the characters adopt our guides based on whatever method they use to choose. So for the sake of that same consistency, as we discuss magic resistance and our stats, keep that in mind. Remembering that the tank building is all about balance, it's best to remember that dexterity, constitution, and wisdom is where most of the saves take place. There are always exceptions, but statistically, these will be the most important when looking through the lens of damage avoidance and mitigation. Some saves reduce the damage by half, some allow you to avoid it altogether, and in some cases, we're not just talking about damage, but effects like poisoned, frightened, restrained, etc. Striking a balance does not mean you need a 20 score in all of these stats. Sometimes just having advantage or proficiency on some of the saves is enough to counter a low stat score, which is good because between class requirements, armor strength requirements, multi-classing requirements, initiative, limited ASI choices, and a limited point buy pool to choose your starting stats, it can become overwhelming. Remember, the tank is all about trade-offs. There are skills and abilities and spells that grant you advantage, proficiency, or just a bonus to the roll. Trying to concentrate on those that boost it for a particular stat can help overcome a low score. Think the Barbarian's Danger sense that allows you to gain advantage on dex saves for attacks and effects that you can see. The Paladin's Aura of Protection can grant a number to any save based on a stat modifier. There are a number of racial advantages to saves. Think Dwarven Resilience, the Halfling-Brave trait. The same. Generally, stacking as many of these abilities or having access to the spells that emulate them is key to survival, especially at the higher levels when casters are throwing out fireballs like their spell slots have no end. Striking the right balance of these to offset low stats will be important design choices. So let's take another look at to-hit mitigation. We've already discussed penalizing the to-hit process as it relates to choosing skills and abilities that bestow disadvantage to hitting us. But more often than not, we really want skills that will penalize mob attack rolls versus targets other than us. It makes us a more appealing target, and in most cases we shy away from to-hit mitigation to us in favor of to-hit mitigation to other party members. Skills like the fighting style Protection, the Barbarian's Ancestral Protectors, spells like Compelled Duel, feats like Sentinel are all good examples. A good tank needs a combination of ways to disadvantage attacks on their other party members, and this will keep you high on the target list. All right, let's take a look at Taunting and Initiative. One of the key attributes of a good tank is their ability to force mobs to attack them and ignoring other party members. In fact, it should rate pretty high. This feature of our tank is tied to initiative in that we really want to be first on the battlefield for positioning purposes. Now, I can hear the rogues crying now, but forcing mobs to attack us is better for the rest of our party if we can set the tone of the battle early. Trying to taunt mobs off of players because you're low on the initiative order means they are taking damage and you have extra work convincing them to turn their attention. If they're already engaged, the DM will be less likely to move them for fear of an opportunity attack. For tanks built with high dex or just decent dex, this is less of an issue, but some tanks may have to compensate for a low dex score. Skills like the Oath of the Crown Paladin's Channel Divinity Champion Challenge or spells like Compelled Duel or Command are all examples of ways to taunt. However, overcoming a low dex for initiative is more difficult. There are feats like Alert and the Barbarian-Feral Instinct and spells like Enhance Ability Cat's Grace that can buffer a low dex. Taunting abilities are a must, and augmenting dex is important unless you want to be a slave to the unmodified dice roll on initiative. So this is a fun subject for me, who to sacrifice. We should probably touch on who to save and who can be sacrificed. Of all the class types in your party to protect the most, it's the healer. If the tank must make a choice, the healer is your best bet. Other fallen party members can be healed out of combat, or as the healer has spell slots to spare. If the tank goes down, then all your party squishy parts are soon to follow. If the healer goes down, your tank is not going to be able to concentrate on mobs and getting up party members. You could be looking at a party wipe. However, the healer has some bandwidth to move about the battlefield, tilting to down members with the occasional heal thrown your way. Know your role. Now you can go ahead and flame me in the comments. All right, let's take a look at positioning. Tank positioning is key but diverse. Small confined spaces, being the one to open doors, or first in the marching order are pretty easy. But when the battlefield opens up or includes obstacles, it becomes more difficult. Knowing your other party member's strengths and weaknesses is very helpful. Does the rogue need you close to gain advantage? Does your caster need a straight line of sight for his attacks? Does the healer need to always be in touch range to heal you? Placing yourself between mobs in your party goes without saying. But when faced with melee range and ranged spell combatants, your first priority should be the melee targets. There are other roles better suited for ranged assailants. Your first goal should be to keep those melee targets locked down until dispatch. Then you can start to assess threats and move on. It may sound counterintuitive as you're being pelted by arrows or other members have caught the attention of an evil caster in the backline. There are other party rules for dealing with backline attackers. Our Hexblade Death Knight and the Tabaxi ShadowDancer are great examples. Adversaries who heal present a unique challenge and an exception to the rule. If you can determine a healer on the battlefield and you can reach them without putting the rest of your party in danger, it's best to prioritize that healer while dragging the melee mobs to you with taunting abilities. Nothing says, "Attack me, I'm insane," like running past a pack of mobs to get the healer locked down. If there is no way to do this without putting the rest of your party in harm's way, you'll have to rely on your backline classes to deal with it. In some cases, having your party members close to make it easier to disadvantage if mobs want to target them is ideal. However, clustered party members can sometimes be inviting an area of effect attack. Knowing what other mobs are doing may force you to change your strategy. Don't be afraid to subject yourself to opportunity attacks to pull your cluster of mobs further from the party if you see an imminent fireball threat. So in summary, for those paying attention, building your tank involves high hit points and armor class, forms of damage mitigation and avoidance, taunting abilities, good initiative, and the abilities to disadvantage. Lock down mobs, interrupt runners, and be willing to potentially sacrifice damage output to make that happen. Simple, right? Well, beyond the initial build, the hardest part is trusting the rest of your party knows their role and plays their part so you can do your tanky thing to the best of your ability. That's it for now. Look for the new tank builds to drop soon as they illustrate examples discussed here.